Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1988. We're going to be taking a look at Dwight Yoakam, and he's going to be performing Buenas Noches from a Lonely Room. She Wore Red Dresses. So let's get Dwight up on screen and see how he gets on.
She wore red dresses with her black shining hair. Oh, she had my baby and caused me to care. Coldly she left me to suffer and cry. Oh, she wore red dresses and told such sweet lies. I never knew him, but he took her away. And on my knees like a madman, for vengeance I pray. For the pain and the anger destroyed my weak mind. Oh, she wore red dresses, left the wounded behind. Searched till I found them.
I'm just going to jump in here. As always, the link to this video is going to be in the description below, so you can watch it the whole way through without me interrupting it. Getting into the intro with Dwight, the way that he plays, obviously his guitar's a little bit low in the mix once everything starts to get going, but in the intro we can hear it nice and clearly, and we've got so much going on there in terms of accuracy with the right hand and the strumming and the picking in the intro, raking across the strings as well. Obviously, when you have an isolated guitar intro and an acoustic guitar here, nowhere to hide, Dwight has to concentrate so much on getting those fretting positions correct, not hitting those lower strings, keeping them quiet, and just being accurate. It can be one of those intros that sounds easy to play, but once you bring it to the live stage, it really ups the ante of technique, considering that it is so under the spotlight for the beginning of the song. And the last thing you want to do is start the song and mess up the intro on the acoustic guitar. Dwight nails it here. He's alternating his picking from the root note to then the fifth, and on the A, he's going from the root note down to the low E string. So that root note is always chopping and changing, giving you that effective running bass line, and it's all flat picked here. So no fingerstyle, just all using the pick. So it means that he's string skipping while singing at the same time. Like I said, it's not really high in the mix, but you can tell what he's doing with that rhythm, just keeping it all moving forward. Talking about that running bass line that we have, you'll notice that when Dwight plays his B shape, he bars that first finger all the way over to that low E string, so he can still alternate between the root of the B and then coming down onto the F sharp. So it's something that technique-wise, you can see that he looks at the guitar just to make sure that he's nailing that bar chord position, but normally you'd only bar as far as the A string, so it's just that tiny little change in order to still give you access to that running bass line. Just a quick word on the lead guitar as well. Even though it's just fretted notes, it's all about melody. Pete Anderson, by the way, on lead guitar and rhythm here. And we've got this tremolo effect on the sound, which you can hear as soon as the lead kicks in. And this is a great example of tremolo and not vibrato. Two totally different techniques in terms of the sound and what they're defined as. The tremolo, which we can hear, is just that increase and decrease in volume. And we get that pulsing effect because of that change in volume, whereas vibrato or vibrato, depending on where you're from, is a change in pitch and not a change in volume. Something that I do want to draw your attention to is the unique sound of Dwight's vocal, because he opts for a very nasal sound, meaning that the resonance that is occurring in his head, he's allowing a lot of that to come out of the nasal cavity rather than his mouth. And you can try this at home. If you do sing yourself, you'll know what I'm talking about. But by stopping the air coming out of your mouth, that's how you get a nasal sound. And the best way to experiment with it is to just use the word sing. It's called the NG sound in terms of being referred to that by vocal teachers. It's when all the air comes out of the nose and just holding on the end of sing, like I mentioned, just going sing. All of the air and the resonance is coming out of your nose. Those notes are just hitching a ride on that air. So if you were to clamp your nose while saying sing, sing, it stops because you're stopping the noise in the air from coming out of your nose, and that's the only place it's coming from. So in terms of singing and tone, and even just talking, if I was to edit and change the amount of air coming out of my mouth and prioritize my nose in terms of where the sound and the air is going to come out of, it means that my voice is going to start sounding, and it'll get to the point where it's only my nose making the sound, so you lose the words and the pronunciation of those words. All of the diction goes out the window because we're now just getting a sound out of the nose, because I've cut off the back of my mouth with my tongue. That's what happens when you say the end of sing. That's what's happening. You're cutting off the air coming into the mouth with the back of your tongue. So just by doing that, Dwight gets a unique sound to his vocal. And interestingly, when he's lower in his range, it sounds like more resonance and air is coming out of his mouth. And then the higher he gets up in his range, the more nasal that sound becomes. And that is one of the things that the NG sound is used for, to not pull your chest voice too high up in your range, by just allowing almost that humming sound to flow up into the head without all that weight coming up with it. And it's just one of those sounds, certainly with Dwight, and the first song that I ever heard of his from the film Terminator 2, and it's when Arnold Schwarzenegger's walking into the bar, into the pub, and you hear on the jukebox, guitars and Cadillacs. And it's Dwight, that's his song, by the way. Not a very good impression of it. But even with that as an example, the first line of those guitars, it's got that nasal quality to it. Guitars, rather than guitars, 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 guitars. It's just taking off a little bit of that edge that you get out of the mouth that gives it that more boomy, chesty quality, and it's something that he would naturally do. I don't think that he sat down trying to nail his airflow through his nose. It's just something that he does naturally, and therefore will set his voice apart from other vocalists, and you know instantly when it's Dwight singing. Just quickly, before we get back into the video, another thing that Dwight does with his vocal is allow it to go to vocal fry, and then he'll put a little cry at the end. And it's really subtle, but a lot of top singers do this. As an example, when you're holding on a note and when Dwight is holding on a note, say that we've got that's our connected sound with our vocal cords. If I allow that note now to go to vocal fry, it sounds like that, vocal fry at the end. But then we can put a little cry on the end of that vocal fry, like that. And that's exactly what Dwight does. It's really subtle, but it's in there. And it's something that you can look out for when you're listening to Dwight singing. Just this little cry at the end of that vocal fry. It's that. It's getting that vocal fry and then just letting the vocal cords touch to get that higher note. It's something that I have explained in depth, especially on the Patsy Cline video that I did, so you can head over to that video if you want to get into the vocal fry and cry that the great singers add to their voice. But let's get back into this performance and we'll watch it until the end.
Then I cursed at the side of the sleeping shadow in the cold neon light, the dark morning silence. I placed the gun to her head. Oh, she wore her dresses, but now she lay dead. She wore red dresses. Thank you, Mr. Flaco Jimenez. Thank you, Flaco.
And there we have it. So we're ending with this call and response in terms of the lead lines between lead guitar and accordion as well. Flaco Jimenez here on the accordion. And having this really mellow sound in terms of the dynamic range that we're covering here, it is all just at that level. And this is the great thing that you can start to appreciate with different performances and different compositions, is that some maintain a particular feel and a mood and don't go beyond that, whereas others will give you a crescendo at the end. This is one of those songs that doesn't end with a crescendo, but just keeps everything at the same level, just motoring along. It's something that I mentioned in the video yesterday about easy listening or being easy to listen to. And it's interesting because when we got back into the video, the ending of that next line had that hint of a cry at the end of that vocal phrase. And we don't get a lot of that in this performance, but certainly with Dwight's vocal, you'll hear it in other songs. But Dwight, by the time that he got his break in 1986, he was 30 years of age. He's one of those guys that had the drive to succeed, having left uni in order to chase the dream of having a career in music. But it wouldn't be until he's 30 years of age that he'd get that break. And he did previously release his album, Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., etc. himself. He self-financed that whole release, but also played at rock venues and also punk rock venues, because at the time, when he was living in Nashville, he would play there. But the style of country music that he played, it wasn't really his sound. It was urban cowboy sound in terms of what people liked. But throughout the years, he just kept plugging away, kept playing at these other clubs. So he was appealing to a demographic that wouldn't have been obvious in terms of playing his honky-tonk style or hillbilly music, as he called it, in these punk and rock clubs. Just to mention that because the scene wasn't really relevant for Dwight's style of music in Nashville, he did move to LA, and that's where he started playing at these clubs and building up a following, and then the tastes changed, and in 1986 is when he signed with Reprise Records and re-released his album that he had done previously, Guitars, Cadillacs, etc, etc, but he also had several other tracks added to that for the main release in 1986, and he had a couple of huge hits. It was a huge album, but Honky Tonk Man got to number 3 in the charts, and also Guitars, Cadillacs, that title track, got to number 4 in the country music charts. And that first Honky Tonk Man was a Johnny Horton track originally, but he put his own spin on it and had massive success with it. Another thing to mention is that with Honky Tonk Man, they filmed a video for that, and this being the mid-1980s, that was in regular rotation on MTV. And in the mid-80s, it was so important to get your video on MTV if you could, because it would give you such an advantage over all the other acts around at the time who didn't have any videos. And by the way, it was the first ever country video played on MTV. And he followed this up with Hillbilly Deluxe in 1987. After that came this album, which was called Buenas Noches from a Lonely Room. And on that album, he also had a duet with Buck Owens. And you can check out Buck on the channel here somewhere if you want to check out him independently, but Dwight is a massive fan of Buck's, and that was his first ever #1. That was Streets of Bakersfield that they recorded together, and it was Dwight's first #1 hit. Just to put things in perspective, Dwight's first 3 albums all went to #1 in the country music charts. His first 7 albums all got into the top 10 of the charts, and the first 5 albums all went at least platinum. And he continued the success into the 90s with If There Was a Way, and that was another huge album in 1990. But then following on, This Time was another huge album, and that went 3 times platinum. So Dwight was just dominating the country music charts in the late 80s and the early to mid 90s. So in the 2000s, he had 3 albums that made it into the top 10 of the country music charts. In 2011 is when he signed to Warner Brothers Nashville, and following that he released his album 3 Pairs in 2012, and that was a massive hit. That got to number 3 in the charts. He then released Secondhand Heart in 2015, and this got to number 2 in the country music charts, so still flying high. In 2016, he released Swimming Pools, Movie Stars, and that got to number 6 in the country music charts. And in 2018, he toured with Lucinda Williams and Steve Earle. And talking about Swimming Pools, Movie Stars, because Dwight is a movie star as well. He's done a lot of TV work and a lot of Hollywood movies as well, starring in films like Panic Room and The Wedding Singer and Bandidas. And you can look through his whole filmography if you want to. It's out there on the internet, but he's one of these guys that did branch off into acting, and it's something that he's had an interest in his whole life as well as music. So a multi-talented artist with the acting, and an original artist as well with the songwriting, something that Dwight has got in his locker, being able to write great songs. And Pete with the production side as well, because he produced that first album. But thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!